Did you know the average food item in a modern supermarket travels 1,500 miles to get to your plate? A single apple might see more of the country than you do in a year. We live in a world of incredible convenience. But this convenience has a hidden cost. It makes us fragile. What happens when the truck stops running? What happens when the power goes out for a week? For our medieval ancestors, these weren't hypothetical questions. Survival was a daily practice. They couldn't run to a store. They couldn't order a replacement part online. They had to rely on themselves, their community, and the land around them. This isn't about romanticizing the past. The medieval period was often brutal, short, and filled with hardship. But within that hardship, people developed a deep practical knowledge of self-sufficiency. They knew how to grow food, preserve it, mend their clothes, and fix their tools. They understood natural cycles in a way we have forgotten. And in that forgotten knowledge, there are lessons for our modern fragile world. What if we could reclaim some of that resilience? What if we could learn not just to consume, but to create and to repair? These are not skills for doomsday preppers. They are skills for anyone who wants a more grounded, secure, and meaningful life. Number 21, can you fix what is broken? We live in a disposable world. Your phone slows down, you get a new one. Your toaster breaks, you buy another for $20. A seam rips on your shirt. It goes in the trash. This behavior would have been completely insane to a medieval person. A broken pot was not garbage. It was a pot that needed fixing. A worn-out pair of shoes was not trash. It was a job for the cobbler. Things were made to last because they had to. The materials were too valuable and the labor too intensive to just throw away. A blacksmith didn't just forge new items. A huge part of his job was repairing old ones. A tinker traveled from village to village mending pots and pans. This mindset of repair was woven into the fabric of life. It was a basic assumption. Of course you would fix it. What else would you do? Today, we call this the right to repair movement. It's a modern fight against a very modern problem. And companies often design products to be difficult or impossible to fix. They use special screws, glue components together, and refuse to sell spare parts. This practice, called planned obsolescence, became widespread in the 20th century. The idea was promoted by figures like industrial designer Brooks Stevens, who described it in the 1950s as instilling in the buyer the desire to own something a little newer, a little better, a little sooner than is necessary. It fuels consumerism by forcing us to buy new things constantly. We generate mountains of waste. According to a 2019 United Nations report, the world produces up to 50 million metric tons of electronic waste each year. That's like throwing out 1,000 laptops every single second. Learning to repair is a radical act. It starts small. Instead of tossing a shirt with a missing button, learn to sew it back on. It takes 5 minutes. Instead of throwing away a wobbly chair, get some wood glue and a clamp. Learn how to solder a loose wire on a pair of headphones. Websites like iFixit offer free guides to repair almost any electronic device you can imagine. They are the modern-day guild of repair masters, sharing knowledge freely. The rise of repair cafes, a concept started by Martin Postma in the Netherlands in 2009, shows a growing hunger for this knowledge. These are free meeting places where people can bring their broken items and fix them together with the help of volunteers. It's about more than just saving money. It's about understanding the objects in your life. It's about reclaiming a sense of agency over your own stuff. When you fix something, you transform it from a disposable commodity into something that is uniquely yours. You add your own story to it. What happens to a society when the vast majority of people lose the basic skills to maintain their own environment? Are we designing products to fail on purpose? And what does that say about our long-term vision for civilization? If an object cannot be repaired, is it truly owned by the person who bought it? Number 20. How do you record what you learn? In a world before printing presses, and certainly before the internet, knowledge was a precious and fragile thing. A single book could be worth as much as a small farm. Monks in monasteries, like the Benedictines, following the rule of Saint Benedict from the 6th century, spent their lives painstakingly copying text by hand. But for the average person, knowledge was passed down orally or through apprenticeship. If you wanted to know how to build a wall, You watched a mason. If you wanted to know which plants were medicinal, you learned from the village healer. This knowledge was vital. Forgetting it could mean the difference between life and death. So how did educated people keep track of their own learning? They often used something called a commonplace book. A commonplace book was a personal journal or scrapbook. It wasn't a diary of feelings. It was a place to collect and organize knowledge. A person would copy down meaningful quotes, recipes, medical remedies, passages from books, prayers, and personal observations. It was a way to create your own personal encyclopedia. Famous figures from the Renaissance and Enlightenment like Leonardo da Vinci and John Locke were known for their extensive notebooks. Locke even published a book in 1706 titled A New Method of Making a Commonplace Book. The idea was to create a tool for remembering and connecting ideas. You wouldn't just write things down chronologically. You would organize them by topic, creating an index so you could find the information later. It was a slow, deliberate way of processing information. You had to physically write it down, which helps cement it in your memory. A 2014 study by Pam Muller and Daniel Oppenheimer at Princeton and UCLA found that students who took notes by hand learned more than students who typed them on a laptop. The act of writing forces you to synthesize, summarize, and understand. In our age of information overload, the idea of a commonplace book is more relevant than ever. We have access to all the information in the world, but how much of it do we actually retain? We bookmark articles we never read again. We watch tutorials we immediately forget. We are drowning in data, but starving for wisdom. Starting a physical commonplace book is a powerful antidote. Get a simple, durable notebook. When you learn something useful, write it down. Did you figure out the perfect ratio for your sourdough starter? Write it down. Did you read a quote that changed your perspective? Write it down. Did you identify a new bird in your backyard? Sketch it and write down its name and call. It's not about curating a perfect document for others to see. It's a working tool for your own mind. It forces you to be selective. You can't copy the whole internet. You have to choose what matters. It slows you down. It makes learning an active physical process. Over time, you will build a unique record of your journey towards self-sufficiency. It will be a book of your own hard-won knowledge, more valuable than any single book you could buy. How does the physical act of writing change the way our brains store and retrieve information? If our digital records were suddenly wiped out, what essential human knowledge would be lost forever? In an age of artificial intelligence, what is the value of a single human's curated knowledge? Number 19, can you read the sky? Before there was a weather app on your phone, there was the sky. Before there was a meteorologist on the evening news, there was the wind. For a medieval farmer, sailor, or traveler, the ability to read the weather was not a hobby. It was a critical survival skill. A farmer needed to know if a coming storm would ruin his hay harvest. A sailor's life depended on spotting the signs of a squall. They didn't have Doppler radar or satellite imagery. They had observation accumulated over generations. They knew that a ring around the moon often meant rain was coming. They knew that a red sky at night was a sailor's delight, but a red sky in the morning was a sailor's warning. This wasn't just folklore. Much of it was based on solid science. The red sky saying, for instance, which dates back to the Bible, works because weather systems in the mid-latitudes generally move from west to east. A red sunset means dry, high-pressure air is moving in from the west. A red sunrise means that dry air has already passed, and a wet, low-pressure system is likely following from the west. This deep connection to the environment is something we have almost entirely lost. We trust the icon on our phone more than our own eyes. We have outsourced our senses. But learning to read the weather is a skill that can be relearned. It begins with paying attention. Look at the clouds. Are they the high, wispy cirrus clouds, often the first sign of an approaching warm front? Or are they the low, puffy cumulus clouds of a fair day? Do they grow tall and dark into cumulonimbus, the thunderhead cloud? The book The Cloud Spotter's Guide by Gavin Pretor-Pinney can teach you to identify dozens of cloud types and what they signify. Pay attention to the wind. Where is it coming from? Is it steady or gusty? A shift in wind direction often signals a change in the weather. In the Northern Hemisphere, the rule of thumb from meteorologist Christophorus Weisballot in the 19th century states that if you stand with your back to the wind, the low-pressure area will be to your left. That's where the bad weather usually is. You can also observe animals. Birds tend to fly lower when air pressure drops before a storm. Some people notice their joints ache with changes in barometric pressure. a phenomenon studied in a 2007 Tufts University study that found a link between falling pressure and increased arthritis pain. All of these are small data points. None of them are 100% accurate on their own. But when you start to combine them, the clouds, the wind, the feel of the air, the behavior of the birds, you begin to build a picture. You develop an intuition. This isn't about abandoning technology, it's about augmenting it with your own senses. It reconnects you to the physical world. It makes you a participant in your environment, not just a passive observer looking at a screen. It is a fundamental skill of awareness. What subtle environmental cues are our bodies still able to detect, even if our conscious minds have forgotten how to interpret them? How much of ancient weather folklore is based on observable science, we are just now beginning to understand. If our global positioning and weather systems were to fail, how long would it take for humanity to relearn the art of navigation and forecasting from scratch? Number 18, are you strong enough for your own life? In the modern world, we separate exercise from life. We drive to a job where we sit in a chair. Then we drive to a gym where we pay to lift heavy things and put them down again. This concept would be utterly alien to a medieval peasant. Their life was exercise. Plowing a field with an ox, scything hay, carrying water from the well, grinding grain by hand, chopping wood. These were not workouts, tasks required for survival. And they built a kind of functional, resilient strength that is very different from the specialized muscles built in a gym. A peasant's body was a tool, hardened and adapted to the specific demands of their life. Historical accounts and skeletal studies, such as research on remains from the medieval village of Warren-on-Percy in England, show that the average person was shorter than us, but often had greater bone density and muscle attachments, indicating a life of hard physical labor. We have engineered movement out of our daily lives. We use cars, elevators, and washing machines. This convenience has made us comfortable, but it has also made us weak. The World Health Organization reported in 2018 that more than a quarter of the world's adult population is not getting enough physical activity. This isn't about achieving a certain body type, it's about developing practical physical resilience. It's about being able to carry your own groceries, lift a heavy box without throwing out your back, or walk a few miles if your car breaks down. This kind of fitness is not built with complex machines. It is built with simple compound movements that mimic real-world activities. You don't need a gym membership to build this kind of strength. You just need to reintegrate physical effort into your life. Carry your groceries instead of using a cart. Take the stairs. Work in your garden. Shovel your own snow. Chop your own wood. These are the exercises our ancestors did. The modern movement known as natural movement, or MoveNat, founded by Erwan Le Corre, is based on this very idea. It focuses on practicing practical skills like lifting, carrying, walking, running, and climbing. It's about building a body that is useful and capable in the real world. Think of it as building a peasant-strong body. Can you get up off the floor without using your hands? Can you carry a 40-pound bag of soil from your car to your garden? Can you help a friend move a couch? This is not about aesthetics. It is about capability. It is about building a body that can serve you well, not one that you have to constantly serve. It's a strong, capable body is the ultimate tool for self-sufficiency. How has the shift from a life of physical labor to a life of sedentary knowledge work changed human physiology in ways we don't yet fully understand? What is the real connection between physical strength and mental resilience? If we had to survive without modern machinery, how many of us possess the physical conditioning to perform the basic tasks of living? Number 17. What do you do when the screens go dark? Imagine a long winter evening in a medieval cottage. The work is done, the fire is lit. There is no television, no internet, no radio, no phone. What do? You talk. You tell stories, you sing songs, you play simple games with dice or stones. You mend tools, you spin wool. Entertainment was not a passive act of consumption. It was an active, participatory, and communal activity. Bards and minstrels traveled from town to town, but they were the exception. Most of the time, you made your own entertainment. Storytelling was a vital skill. It was how history, legends, and morals were passed down. It strengthened community bonds and provided a shared culture. The great epic poems like Beowulf were originally part of a rich oral tradition long before they were ever written down. Today, we are rarely bored, and that might be a problem. Any moment of stillness is instantly filled by a screen. We scroll through social media feeds, binge watch series, and play games. A 2019 report from the media research firm Nielsen showed that the average American adult spent over 11 hours per day interacting with media. We are constantly consuming content created by others. We have become passive recipients of entertainment rather than active creators of it. This has an effect on our minds. Nicholas Carr, in his book The Shallows What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains, argues that our constant online activity may be eroding our capacity for deep concentration and contemplation. We get used to constant stimulation. We forget how to just be reclaiming the art of self-entertainment is a powerful act of self-sufficiency. It is about learning to be content with your own thoughts and to create your own joy. It starts with a simple step: turn off the screens. Intentionally schedule time for non-digital activities. Learn to play a simple instrument like a harmonica or a ukulele, get a deck of cards, and learn some family games. Read a book out loud with someone, or just sit and talk. Tell each other stories about your day, your childhood, your hopes. Another powerful practice is simply learning to do nothing. Sit by a window and watch the world go by. Let your mind wander. This is not wasted time. It is in these moments of quiet boredom that creativity and self-reflection can happen. We need to relearn how to be with ourselves. If you have a skill like playing the guitar or knitting, share it. We'll host a small gathering where you and your friends make something together. This is the modern version of the medieval cottage evening. It builds real community, not the digital illusion of it. It reminds us that the best entertainment often comes not from a screen, but from each other. What is the long-term neurological effect of replacing communal, creative leisure with solitary, passive consumption of digital media? Has the art of oral storytelling been permanently lost, or is it just dormant? If we were stripped of our electronic devices, would we remember how to entertain and connect with one another? Number 16, can you tell the difference between want and need? Frugality was not a lifestyle choice in the medieval world, it was a condition of existence. For a peasant farmer, a want beyond basic needs was a dangerous luxury. Every resource was precious. A piece of iron was painstakingly forged. A woolen cloak represented a year's growth from a sheep and countless hours of spinning and weaving. Waste was not an option. You ate every part of the animal, you wore your clothes until they were rags, and then you used the rags for something else. This wasn't about being cheap. It was about a deep, ingrained respect for materials and labor. This mindset is captured in the old English proverb, "Was not, want not." It was a simple statement of cause and effect. If you wasted what you had, you would surely find yourself in want later. We live in the polar opposite of that world. Our economy is built on encouraging wants and convincing us they are needs. Advertisements, social media, and a culture of consumerism all scream the same message: you are not enough. But this new product will fix you. The concept of retail therapy suggests that buying things is a valid way to manage our emotions. As a result, many of us are drowning in stuff and in debt. The Federal Reserve reported that U.S. household debt reached a record $17.5 trillion in late 2023. We buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. This cycle creates anxiety, not happiness. A 2014 study in the journal Motivation and Emotion by psychologist Tim Kasser showed that people who prioritized materialistic goals were more likely to experience anxiety and depression. Practicing frugality today is a form of rebellion. It's a conscious choice to step off the consumer treadmill. It starts with learning to distinguish between a want and a need. Before you buy something, ask yourself a few simple questions. Do I truly need this, or do I just want it? Can I borrow it from someone? Can I find it used? Can I make it myself? Can I live without it? This isn't about depriving yourself of joy. It's about finding joy in things that don't have a price tag. It's the pleasure of a home-cooked meal instead of an expensive restaurant. It's the satisfaction of a repaired tool instead of a new one. It's the richness of a walk in the woods instead of a trip to the mall. Frugality is a form of self-sufficiency because it frees you. It frees you from debt. It frees you from the anxiety of constantly wanting more. It frees up your resources, your time, and your money to be spent on things that truly matter, like experiences, relationships, and skills. The author and farmer Wendell Berry wrote, "To be interested in food but not in food production is clearly absurd." The same can be said of our possessions. To be interested in having things but not in their origin, their maintenance, or their ultimate fate is a form of modern absurdity. Frugality cures this absurdity. It makes us mindful consumers and ultimately mindful producers. If our entire economic system is based on constant growth and consumption, what would happen if a large portion of the population suddenly adopted a mindset of radical frugality? Is the desire for new things a natural human trait, or is it a cultural behavior that has been taught to us? How much of our personal identity is tied up in the things we own, and what are we without them? Number 15, who would you turn to if the store is closed? In the medieval village, you could not be an island. Your survival was directly tied to the people around you. You depended on the blacksmith to shoe your ox and mend your plow. He depended on you for the grain you grew. The miller ground everyone's grain. The weaver made cloth. The tanner made leather. This web of interdependence was formalized in the guild system, which began to flourish in the High Middle Ages around the 11th and 12th centuries. Guilds were associations of artisans or merchants who controlled the practice of their craft in a particular town. They set quality standards, regulated prices, and trained apprentices. But beyond economics, they created a powerful social network. The guild members supported each other in times of sickness and hardship. This was your social safety net. If your house burned down, your neighbors didn't just offer thoughts and prayers. They showed up with hammers and helped you rebuild. Today, we are more connected than ever digitally, but often more isolated in reality. We can order anything we need online and have it delivered to our door without speaking to a single person. We might not even know our neighbors' names. Political scientist Robert Putnam, in his 2000 book, Bowling Alone, documented a sharp decline in social capital and civic engagement in America over the last few decades. We are less likely to join clubs, attend community meetings, or even have friends over for dinner. This isolation makes us vulnerable. A strong community is a crucial part of self-sufficiency. You can't possibly master every single skill yourself, but you can be part of a network where skills are shared. Building a local network is a conscious act. It starts with getting to know your neighbors, learn their names, find out what they're good at. Maybe the retired man down the street is a master gardener. Maybe the young woman next door knows how to fix computers. You have skills they can use too. This is the foundation of a barter or skill-sharing system. Formal platforms like Simbi or local time banks exist, but it can be as simple as an informal agreement. You help your neighbor fix their fence, and they give you a dozen eggs from their chickens. This builds relationships that are far stronger than simple cash transactions. Look for existing groups in your community. Join a community garden, a tool library, or a makerspace. A tool library is a modern guild hall. For a small annual fee, you can borrow everything from a simple wrench to a heavy-duty table saw. It gives you access to resources you couldn't afford on your own and connects you with people who know how to use them. When a crisis hits, whether it's a natural disaster or a personal emergency, it is this network of real, local relationships that will be your most valuable asset. The money in your bank account will be useless if the person with the chainsaw and the knowledge to use it safely lives 100 miles away. In a hyper-individualistic culture, how do we relearn the art of communal reliance and mutual aid? What is the tipping point where a collection of households becomes a true, resilient community? Are digital social networks a poor substitute for real-world connections, or can they be used to strengthen local ties? Number 14, can you create value from what others throw away? In the medieval world, there was no such thing as a landfill. The very concept of trash as we know it did not exist. Every single thing had a potential use. Food scraps were fed to pigs or chickens, or they were added to the compost heap. Old clothes were turned into rags, quilts, or patches. Broken pottery could be ground down and used in building materials. Wood ash from the fire was a source of lye for making soap, or could be used to enrich the soil in the garden. Human and animal waste, known as night soil, was a valuable fertilizer, a practice that continued for centuries. Everything was part of a cycle. To throw something away was to throw away a valuable resource. The world was a closed loop. We live in a linear world of take, make, dispose. We extract resources, manufacture products, and then throw them away when we're done. According to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the average American generates about 4.9 pounds of municipal solid waste per day. That adds up to over 1,800 pounds per person per year. Our landfills are overflowing, and our oceans are choking on plastic. We have broken the cycle. The challenge is to start seeing waste not as an endpoint, but as a resource. This is the core principle of what is now called the circular economy, but it's an ancient idea. It starts in the kitchen. Don't throw away vegetable scraps. Keep them in a bag in the freezer. When you have enough, you can simmer them with water to make a flavorful vegetable stock. Coffee grounds are great for your garden, especially for acid-loving plants like blueberries. And eggshells can be crushed and added to the soil for calcium. This mindset extends beyond the kitchen. Learn the art of composting. A simple compost pile in your backyard can turn all your food scraps, yard trimmings, and paper products into rich, black soil that will make your garden thrive. You are literally creating fertile earth from your garbage. This is a kind of everyday alchemy. Look at the things you throw away and ask, what else could this be? A glass jar can be a storage container. An old t-shirt can be cut into cleaning rags. Old lumber can be used to build a raised garden bed. This is not just about recycling, which is often an energy-intensive industrial process. This is about upcycling and reusing. It's about being creative and resourceful. It's about looking at a pile of what someone else calls trash and seeing a pile of potential. This is a fundamental skill for self-sufficiency. It reduces your reliance on buying new things and makes you a more active participant in the life cycle of the materials you use. It reconnects you to the closed-loop system that our ancestors understood by necessity. What are the most valuable resources we are currently throwing away without a second thought? Can a truly zero-waste society ever be achieved on a large scale within our current economic model? How do we shift the cultural perception of waste from something disgusting and useless to something valuable and full of potential? Number 13, do you live by the sun or by the clock? Before the invention of reliable mechanical clocks in the 14th century, and certainly before their widespread use, time was measured differently. It was not a grid of uniform 24-hour days. It was fluid, governed by the sun, the moon, and the seasons. For a farmer, the day started at sunrise and ended at sunset. The hours themselves changed with the seasons. A summer hour was long, and a winter hour was short. Time was marked by natural events: the first cock's crow, the angle of the sun, the ringing of church bells for the canonical hours like matins, lauds, and vespers. This was a cyclical, organic sense of time, deeply connected to the natural world. Life had a rhythm. There was a time for planting, a time for growing, and a time for harvesting. There was a time for hard work in the long summer days, and a time for rest and repair in the short days of winter. We live by the tyranny of the clock. Our days are chopped into precise, equal units of minutes and seconds. We work from 9 to 5. Regardless of the season, we use artificial lights to extend the day and defy the darkness. We have lost touch with the natural rhythms that govern human life for millennia. This has consequences. The widespread use of artificial light at night is now known to disrupt our circadian rhythms, the internal body clock that regulates our sleep-wake cycle. A 2017 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded to 3 scientists for their discoveries of the molecular mechanisms controlling the circadian rhythm. The disruption of this rhythm has been linked to sleep disorders, obesity, depression, and other health problems. We are creatures of the day who are trying to live 24/7 lives. Reconnecting with natural cycles is a powerful step toward a more balanced life. It doesn't mean you have to give up your job and live by candlelight. It means making small, conscious adjustments. Try to wake up with the sun, open your curtains, and let the morning light into your bedroom. This helps to set your internal clock. Try to get some sunlight during the day, especially in the morning. A study from Northwestern University in 2014 found that office workers with windows in their workplace got more light exposure during the day and slept better at night. In the evening, dim the lights. Avoid the bright blue light from screens, phones, tablets, computers for at least an hour before bed. That blue light is particularly effective at tricking your brain into thinking it's still daytime. Pay attention to the seasons. Eat foods that are in season in your local area. They will be fresher, more nutritious, and more in tune with what your body needs. Allow yourself to slow down in the winter. It is a natural time for rest and reflection. By aligning your life more closely with the great rhythms of day and night, and summer and winter, you are tapping into a powerful, ancient source of health and well-being. How much of modern anxiety and stress is caused by our complete disconnection from the natural, seasonal rhythms of life? What are the subtle biological processes that are still tuned to lunar and solar cycles, despite our attempts to ignore them? If we could redesign our work and school schedules to align with the seasons, what would our society look like? Number 12 is your most important tool sharp. In the medieval world, a sharp tool was a matter of life and death. A dull axe meant you spent more energy chopping wood, energy you couldn't afford to waste. A dull knife made butchering an animal difficult and dangerous. A dull scythe made the harvest slow and inefficient. Every craftsman, farmer, and cook understood the absolute necessity of keeping their tools sharp. A sharp blade is a safe blade. It cuts predictably and requires less force, reducing the chance of a slip. Sharpening was a constant, almost ritualistic task. People used whetstones, natural stones, with a fine grit to carefully hone the edges of their knives, axes, and sickles. This skill was passed down from parent to child. It was as fundamental as knowing how to light a fire. It was a sign of a competent and responsible person. A person with dull tools was seen as lazy or foolish. Today, many of us use tools that are dull, and we don't even realize it. We struggle to cut a tomato with a kitchen knife, mashing it instead of slicing it. We hack at a piece of wood with a dull saw. We have come to accept inefficiency as normal. Or, when a tool becomes dull, we simply throw it away and buy a new one. This is part of our disposable culture. But learning to sharpen your tools is a foundational skill of self-sufficiency. It saves you money, reduces waste, and makes your work more efficient, safer, and more enjoyable. The most important place to start is your kitchen knives. You don't need expensive equipment. A simple sharpening stone, also known as a water stone or an oil stone, is all you need. There are countless videos online that can teach you the basic technique. It's about holding the knife at a consistent angle, usually around 15 to 20 degrees, and drawing it across the stone. It takes practice to develop a feel for it, but the skill will last you a lifetime. The principle extends beyond knives. Learn to sharpen your garden shears, your shovel, and your axe. A sharp shovel cuts through roots and soil with ease. A sharp axe bites deep into wood. You can use a simple metal file for many of these larger tools. This act of maintenance connects you to your tools. You are no longer just a user, you are a caretaker. You understand how the tool works. You appreciate its design. The author Matthew B. Crawford, in his book Shop Class's Soulcraft, argues that working with our hands and maintaining our own tools provides a deep sense of satisfaction and competence that is often missing from modern knowledge work. Sharpening a tool is a perfect example of this. It is a quiet, focused task that produces a tangible, immediate result. Your knife is sharper, your work is easier, you have made your own world a little bit better, a little more efficient with your own two hands. What does our collective neglect of tool maintenance say about our relationship with the physical world? Is the satisfaction derived from manual skills like sharpening a tool a fundamental human need that many people are missing? If you had to perform a basic survival task like building a shelter or preparing food, would your own tools be a help or a hindrance? This is number 11. Can you make something useful from a tree? Wood was the universal material of the medieval world. It was the primary fuel for heat and cooking. It was used to build houses, like from the timber frames to the shingles on the roof. It was used to make furniture, tools, carts, and ships. A person's relationship with wood was intimate and lifelong. A peasant would know which wood was best for burning, like oak or ash, and which was best for building. They would know how to use a simple axe, an adze for shaping beams, and a froe for splitting shingles. Woodworking was not just a specialized craft for carpenters. Basic wood skills were common knowledge. The ability to cut a straight line, shape a joint, or carve a simple tool was a part of everyday life. This deep knowledge of the local forest was a form of wealth. The Domesday Book, a massive survey of England completed in 1086, often measured the value of a manor by the size of its woodland and how many pigs it could support on acorns. In our modern world, most of us are completely disconnected from this foundational material. We live in houses made of wood, but we have no idea how they are put together. We buy furniture from a box and assemble it with an Allen key. The idea of making something useful from a raw piece of wood seems like a magical, unattainable skill. But it doesn't have to be. Basic woodworking is one of the most accessible and rewarding self-sufficiency skills you can learn. It starts with a few simple hand tools, a good saw, a hammer, a chisel, and a measuring tape. You don't need a large workshop filled with expensive power tools. For centuries, incredible structures and beautiful furniture were made with hand tools alone. Start with a simple project. Build a small box, build a stool, build a raised bed for your garden. The author and woodworking expert Roy Underhill, host of the long-running PBS show The Woodwright's Shop, has spent his career demonstrating that complex and beautiful things can be made with simple tools and traditional techniques. Her books, like The Anarchist's Tool Chest by Christopher Schwartz, champion the idea of a small, essential set of hand tools that can last a lifetime and build almost anything you need. Working with wood teaches you patience. You have to measure carefully. You have to cut slowly. You learn to read the grain of the wood, to understand its strengths and weaknesses. It is a conversation between you and the material. When you build something yourself, you appreciate it in a way you never could with a store-bought item. You know its flaws and its strengths because you put them there. It is a part of you. This skill connects you, not just to your home, but to the natural world that provides the material in the first place. Why have basic manual skills like woodworking become so rare, even though we are surrounded by wooden objects? What is the psychological effect of living in an environment that you have had no hand in creating or maintaining? If you were given a log and a few basic tools, could you create a single useful object? Number 10, can you make your own soap? For most of human history, soap was a harsh homemade substance. It was not a luxury item with a pleasant scent. It was a utilitarian necessity for cleaning textiles and, to a lesser extent, people. The basic recipe has remained unchanged for thousands of years. The ancient Babylonians were making a form of soap as early as 2800 BC. The process, called saponification, involves mixing a fat or oil with an alkali. In medieval times, the fat would have been tallow-rendered animal fat from butchered animals. The alkali was lye, which was produced by leaching water through wood ashes, often an imprecise process, but it produced a substance that could cut through grease and dirt, which was essential for washing clothes and maintaining a basic level of hygiene. Soap making was a common household chore, often done once a year in large batches. Today, we buy soap as a cheap, disposable commodity. We don't think about how it's made. But the store-bought bars are often full of synthetic detergents, fragrances, and chemicals that can be harsh on the skin. Making your own soap is a surprisingly simple and rewarding process. It's a perfect example of taking a medieval necessity and turning it into a modern, enjoyable skill. The basic ingredients are still the same fat and lye, but you have more choices. You can use plant-based oils like olive oil, coconut oil, or shea butter instead of animal fat. You can buy pure sodium hydroxide lye instead of the messy and unpredictable process of leaching it from wood ash. This makes the process much safer and more reliable. Lye is a caustic substance and must be handled with care gloves, and safety glasses are essential. But as long as you follow basic safety precautions, the process is straightforward. There are many great books and online resources that can walk you through the cold process soap making method. You carefully mix the lye with water, then blend that solution with your chosen oils. You stir the mixture until it thickens to a consistency called trace. At this point, you can add natural colorants like clay or spices and essential oils for scent. You pour the mixture into a mold, let it sit for a day or two to harden, and then cut it into bars. The soap then needs to cure for 4 to 6 weeks, allowing the saponification process to complete and the water to evaporate, resulting in a hard, long-lasting bar. The result is a high-quality natural soap that is far superior to anything you can buy in the store. You have complete control over the ingredients. You can tailor it to your own skin type. It's a practical skill that provides you with a basic necessity, but it is also a creative and satisfying craft. It's a small piece of practical chemistry that turns a few simple ingredients into something useful and even beautiful. Why have we become so disconnected from the chemistry of our own homes and cleaning products? What are the long-term health effects of the synthetic chemicals found in many commercial soaps and detergents? If the supply chain for basic hygiene products was disrupted, how many people would know how to create them from scratch? Number 9, can you clothe yourself? Before the Industrial Revolution, clothing was one of the most valuable things a person could own. It was not uncommon for a person's will to list individual garments. A good woolen cloak could be a significant part of a person's wealth. The process of making cloth was incredibly labor-intensive. It started with raising sheep for wool or growing flax for linen. The wool had to be sheared, cleaned, carded, and then spun into thread on a drop spindle or a spinning wheel. The flax had to be harvested, retted, rotted to separate the fibers, broken, scutched, and hackled before it could be spun. Then, the thread had to be woven into cloth on a loom. All of this was done by hand. It's estimated that it took at least 10 spinners to supply one weaver. This is why clothes were worn until they literally fell apart. And when they did, they were not thrown away, they were mended. A patch on a pair of trousers was not a sign of poverty, it was a sign of good sense. We live in the age of fast fashion. Clothing is cheaper and more disposable than at any other point in human history. The average American throws away about 81 pounds of clothing every year, according to the EPA. We buy clothes, wear them a few times, and then discard them. The quality is often so poor that they are not worth mending. This industry has huge environmental and social costs, from the water used to grow cotton to the poor labor conditions in many garment factories. Learning to mend your own clothes is a radical act of defiance against this system. It is also a very practical medieval skill. You don't need to be an expert tailor. You just need to learn a few basic stitches. A needle, some thread, and a pair of scissors are all you need to get started. Learn how to sew on a button. It is a 5-minute task that can save a favorite shirt. Learn a simple running stitch to repair a split seam. Learn how to apply a patch to a hole in the knee of your jeans. This can be done visibly and creatively, a practice known as sashiko in Japan, or simply visible mending. It turns the repair into a design element, celebrating the history of the garment. Tom of Holland is a modern, visible mender who champions the idea that a repaired garment is more beautiful and valuable than a new one. Mending connects you to your clothing. It transforms you from a passive consumer into an active caretaker. It saves you money and reduces waste. It is a small, quiet act of rebellion. And if you want to go a step further, you can learn basic sewing skills to make your own simple garments, or even try your hand at knitting or crocheting to make your own hats and scarves. These skills put the means of production back into your own hands. What is the true cost of a $5 t-shirt, and who actually pays it? Has the skill of mending been so completely lost that we see a hole as a catastrophic failure rather than an opportunity for repair? If we began to value our clothes based on their durability and repairability instead of their trendiness, how would the entire fashion industry change? Number 8, can you find medicine in your backyard? In the medieval period, there was no corner drugstore. If you got sick, you relied on a local healer, a wise woman, or knowledge passed down through your family. Their pharmacy was the local landscape. They knew that willow bark could ease a fever, a fact we now know is due to the presence of salicin, the precursor to aspirin. They knew that the leaves of the plantain plant, a common weed, could be chewed into a poultice to soothe insect bites and stings. They knew that a tea made from yarrow could help stop bleeding. This knowledge was codified in herbals, books that described plants and their medicinal uses. One of the most famous medieval healers was Hildegard of Bingen, a 12th century German abbess who wrote extensively on medicine and natural history in her book Physica. This was not superstition. It was the result of centuries of trial and error observation. It was a practical folk science. Today, we have access to powerful modern medicine, which is a wonderful thing. But we have also lost the basic knowledge of the plants that grow all around us. We see them as either decorative or as weeds to be pulled. We have forgotten that many of them have a long history of medicinal use. Learning basic herbalism is not about replacing your doctor. It is about becoming more self-reliant for common, minor ailments. It's about knowing how to make a cup of chamomile tea to calm your nerves or a ginger tea to settle your stomach. It is about understanding the plants in your own environment. The first step is to get a good field guide for your specific region and learn to identify plants with 100% certainty. Never ingest a plant unless you are absolutely sure what it is. Start with a few common, safe, and easily identifiable plants. Dandelions, often cursed as a lawn weed, are a nutritional powerhouse. The leaves are rich in vitamins, and the root can be roasted and used as a coffee substitute. Your mint is easy to grow and makes a wonderful tea for digestion. Calendula flowers can be infused in oil to make a salve that is excellent for soothing dry skin and minor cuts. You can grow a small medicinal herb garden with plants like lavender for relaxation, lemon balm for stress relief, and thyme as an antiseptic. In books like Rosemary Gladstar's Medicinal Herbs, A Beginner's Guide, provide a safe and accessible entry point into this world. You're learning about the medicinal properties of plants changes your relationship with the natural world. A walk in the woods or even in your own backyard becomes a journey of discovery. You are no longer just seeing green things, you are seeing a landscape of potential allies for your health and well-being. How much traditional plant-based medical knowledge has been lost forever with the destruction of natural habitats and the decline of indigenous cultures? What potential cures for modern diseases are waiting to be discovered in common plants that we currently dismiss as weeds? As antibiotic resistance grows, could the study of the natural antibacterial and antiviral properties of plants provide a new frontier for medicine? Number 7. Where does your water come from? For us, water is invisible. It comes out of a tap. We turn a handle and it appears clean and seemingly limitless. We use it, it goes down a drain, and we don't think about it again. For a medieval person, water was a constant preoccupation. It was a source of life, but also a source of labor and danger. A village was typically built near a reliable water source, a river, a spring, or a lake. If not, a well had to be dug by hand, a massive undertaking. Water then had to be hauled bucket by bucket for drinking, cooking, and washing. A single household could spend hours each day just on this task, and the water was often not clean. Waterborne diseases like cholera and typhoid were a constant threat. The Great Stink of London in 1858, though post-medieval, was a dramatic result of centuries of dumping waste into the River Thames, the city's main source of drinking water. People understood the importance of water in a way we cannot fathom. They knew where it came from, how much effort it took to get it, and the dangers it could hold. Our modern water infrastructure is a marvel of engineering, but it is also fragile. A major power outage, a natural disaster, or a contamination event can shut it down. Every household should have a basic emergency supply of water. The standard recommendation is 1 gallon per person per day for at least 3 days. But a truly self-sufficient mindset goes further. It involves understanding where your water comes from and how you could source it if the taps ran dry. The first step is to manage the water that falls from the sky. Rainwater harvesting is an ancient practice that is incredibly relevant today. A simple rain barrel connected to a downspout can collect hundreds of gallons of water from your roof. This water is not potable without treatment, but it is perfect for watering your garden, which can significantly reduce your reliance on municipal water. The next step is knowing how to make water safe to drink. The most reliable method is boiling. Bringing water to a rolling boil for at least 1 minute will kill most pathogens. Another option is a good quality water filter. Modern backpacking filters, like those made by Sawyer or Katadyn, are small, relatively inexpensive, and can filter thousands of gallons of water, removing bacteria and protozoa. Having one of these in your emergency kit is a wise investment. It's also worth identifying potential water sources near your home. Is there a river, a creek, or a lake within walking distance? Understanding your local watershed is a fundamental part of understanding your environment. Water is our most essential resource. Reclaiming a conscious relationship with it, knowing where it comes to you from, and how to care for it is a foundational step toward true resilience. If a long-term disaster were to compromise our centralized water systems, how would our densely populated cities cope? What ancient techniques for finding, collecting, and purifying water have we forgotten? As aquifers are depleted and droughts become more common, will the act of collecting rainwater shift from a niche hobby to a suburban necessity? Number 6, could you survive without a lighter? Fire was the center of the medieval home. It was the only source of heat in the cold winters. It was the only source of light after the sun went down. It was how all food was cooked. The hearth was the heart of the house. Keeping the fire going was a critical daily task. The embers would be carefully banked at night so they could be easily rekindled in the morning. If the fire went out, starting a new one was not a simple task. There were no matches or lighters. The most common method was using a flint and steel. Striking the hard flint against a piece of high-carbon steel would create a spark. This spark had to be caught in a very fine, dry material called tinder, things like char cloth, dry fungus, or flax fibers. Once the tinder was glowing, it was transferred to a larger bundle of kindling and gently blown into a flame. This was a skill every single person had to know. Fire was not a convenience, it was life. We have tamed fire. We have put it behind glass in our stoves and trapped it in our furnaces. We command it with the flick of a switch or the click of a lighter. We have lost all reverence for it. And with that, we have lost the skill to create it from scratch. The fire is a primary tool for survival. It can purify water, cook food, provide warmth, signal for help, and ward off predators. Knowing how to build and manage a fire is a fundamental self-sufficiency skill. And you should know how to do it without relying on a disposable lighter, which can fail, get wet, or run out of fuel. The first step is to practice with the modern equivalent of flint and steel, a ferrocerium rod, often called a fire steel. It's a man-made material that creates a shower of very hot sparks when scraped with a sharp edge. It works even when wet and will last for thousands of strikes. Mastering fire is about understanding the fire triangle: fuel, heat, and oxygen. You need all three. You also need to understand the three types of fuel: tinder, kindling, and fuel wood. Non-tinder is the fine, fluffy material that catches the initial spark, dry or lint, cotton balls with petroleum jelly, or natural materials like birch bark or cattail fluff. Kindling is the small twigs and sticks, about the size of a pencil, that the tinder will ignite. Fuel wood is the larger logs that will sustain the fire. Learn how to build a proper fire lay, like a teepee or a log cabin structure that allows for good airflow. Practice in different conditions. Try to make a fire when it's windy or after it has rained. This is when your skill is truly tested. As the survival expert Morris Kochanski wrote in his classic book Bushcraft, the more you know, the less you carry. Knowing how to reliably make a fire with a simple tool and natural materials is a skill that weighs nothing, but it could be worth everything. In a world of electricity and gas, have we forgotten the raw elemental power of fire and our deep evolutionary connection to it? What is the psychological impact of being able to create warmth and light with your own hands? If you were stranded in the wilderness with only a knife, would you be able to keep yourself warm? Number 5, can you make your own bread? Bread was the staff of life in the medieval world. For the vast majority of the population, it was the main source of calories. A peasant's diet might consist of little more than bread, pottage, a thick stew, and ale. But this bread was not the soft white sliced loaf we know today. It was a heavy, dense, and nutritious loaf made from whole grains like wheat, rye, or spelt. Often, several types of grain were mixed together in a bread called maslin. The flour was coarse and stone ground. The leavening came from a sourdough starter, a living culture of wild yeast and bacteria that was carefully maintained and passed down. Not everyone had an oven in their home. Many villages had a communal oven where villagers would bring their shaped loaves to be baked, often for a small fee or a portion of the flour paid to the lord of the manor. Bread was central to life, both nutritionally and socially. Today, bread is often an afterthought. We buy it in a plastic bag at the supermarket. It's an industrialized product, often made with highly refined flour, commercial yeast, and a long list of additives and preservatives. The process is designed for speed and consistency, not for nutrition or flavor. The result is a product that has been stripped of much of its original nutritional value. But there is a growing movement to reclaim the ancient art of bread making, specifically sourdough. Sourdough baking uses the same principles as medieval bread making. You cultivate a starter, a symbiotic culture of yeast and bacteria, SCOBY, that lives on your counter and is fed with flour and water. This starter is what makes the bread rise. The fermentation process of sourdough does more than just create gas to leaven the dough. As explained by food scientist Harold McGee in his book On Food and Cooking, the long fermentation process begins to break down the proteins, gluten, and starches in the flour. This makes the bread easier to digest and increases the bioavailability of its nutrients. Making your own sourdough bread is a deeply rewarding process. It requires only 3 ingredients: flour, water, and salt. But it teaches you patience and attentiveness. You have to learn to read the dough, to feel when it is ready. You have to tend to your starter, keeping it alive and active. It is a living thing in your kitchen. There is a rhythm to it: feeding the starter, mixing the dough, letting it ferment, shaping the loaf, and finally baking it. The smell of freshly baked bread filling your home is one of the most primal and comforting experiences. When you pull a crackling golden brown loaf from your own oven, you are not just making food. You are participating in a tradition that is thousands of years old. You are providing for yourself in the most fundamental way. What nutrients and microorganisms were present in ancient, stone-ground, long-fermented bread that are completely absent from our modern industrial loaves? How does the process of working with a living culture like a sourdough starter change our relationship with our food? If the supply of commercial yeast suddenly disappeared, would we remember how to capture and cultivate the wild yeasts that are all around us? Number four, do you know how to keep chickens? For a medieval peasant, livestock was a form of wealth. A cow or an ox was a major asset. But even for a humble cottager, a few chickens scratching around the yard were a vital part of the household economy. Chickens were a low-cost, high-return investment. They could forage for much of their own food, eating insects, seeds, and kitchen scraps. In return, they provided a steady supply of nutritious eggs, a crucial source of protein. On special occasions, a chicken might be killed for meat, but their primary value was in their daily egg production. They were also a source of high nitrogen manure, a valuable fertilizer for the kitchen garden. So chickens were the perfect small-scale, multi-purpose animal for a self-sufficient homestead. In the 21st century, the idea of keeping chickens has seen a massive resurgence. As people become more interested in where their food comes from, raising a small flock of backyard chickens has become a popular and practical step toward food security. The regulations for keeping chickens vary by city and town, but many urban and suburban areas now permit small flocks of hens. Roosters are often banned due to noise. A few hens can provide a family with a constant supply of fresh eggs that are far superior in taste and nutritional quality to their store-bought counterparts. A 2007 study by Mother Earth News found that eggs from pasture-raised hens contain significantly more vitamin E, beta-carotene, and omega-3 fatty acids than factory farm eggs. Getting started with chickens is relatively simple. You need a secure coop to protect them from predators and provide a place for them to roost at night and lay their eggs. You need a source of food and fresh water. You can buy chicks from a local farm supply store or even have them shipped to you through the mail. Raising them from chicks is a delightful experience. They are entertaining animals, each with its own personality. They are a wonderful way to teach children about the life cycle and the responsibility of caring for another living creature. And they are incredible waste recyclers. They will happily eat most of your kitchen scraps, turning your leftover vegetable peels and stale bread into delicious eggs. Their manure, once composted, will do wonders for your garden soil. Keeping chickens reconnects you to the food cycle in a very direct and tangible way. It is a small but powerful step away from the anonymous industrial food system and toward a more resilient and responsible way of eating. How has the industrialization of egg production changed the nutritional content and flavor profile of the common egg? What are the ethical implications of the modern battery cage system for laying hens? If every household with a small yard kept a few chickens, how would that impact our local food systems and reduce food waste? Number three, could you survive a winter on what you grew? Before refrigeration and global shipping, eating seasonally was not a choice, it was a reality. In the summer and autumn, there was abundance, but the winter was the hungry gap. Survival depended on your ability to preserve the harvest. A medieval peasant had to make the bounty of a few months last for an entire year. They used a variety of ingenious methods, all without electricity. Salting was one of the most common. The salt draws water out of food, making it inhospitable to the microbes that cause spoilage. Meat and fish were heavily salted or brined to preserve them. The importance of salt in the ancient world cannot be overstated. It was so valuable that it was used as currency. The word salary comes from the Latin salarium, which was the payment given to Roman soldiers to buy salt. Drying was another key method. Fruits, vegetables, and herbs could be laid out in the sun or hung near the hearth to dehydrate. This removed the water that bacteria need to grow. Smoking meat and fish not only dried them, but also coated them with natural antimicrobial compounds from the smoke. And then there was fermentation. This is a process where beneficial microbes are encouraged to grow. These microbes transform the food, create natural preservatives like lactic acid, and make the food more nutritious and digestible. Sauerkraut, fermented cabbage, and other fermented vegetables were a vital source of vitamins during the long winter months. It's thought that sailors on long voyages who ate sauerkraut, like those on Captain Cook's ships in the 18th century, were able to avoid scurvy, a deadly disease caused by a lack of vitamin C. These ancient preservation techniques are just as useful today. They are a way to eat locally and seasonally all year round. You can capture the peak flavor of summer produce and enjoy it in the dead of winter. Canning is a more modern method developed in the early 19th century that uses heat and vacuum sealing to preserve foods in glass jars. But the older methods are often simpler and require less specialized equipment. In fermentation in particular has seen a huge revival thanks to advocates like Sandor Katz, author of Willed Fermentation. You can make your own kimchi, pickles, or kombucha with little more than a jar, salt, and vegetables. It is a safe and fascinating process that connects you to the invisible world of microbes that are all around us. You can also easily dry your own herbs by hanging them in a warm, dry place. A modern food dehydrator makes it easy to dry fruits and vegetables to make healthy snacks or ingredients for winter soups. Learning these skills reduces your food waste, saves you money, and gives you a deep sense of security. Knowing that your pantry is stocked with food that you grew and preserved yourself is a profound form of self-sufficiency. What beneficial microbial cultures have been eliminated from the modern diet through our reliance on refrigeration and sterile, packaged foods? How much of the world's food production is wasted simply because we lack the basic knowledge to preserve it? If our power grid failed for an extended period, what would happen to the food supply stored in our refrigerators and freezers? Number two, do you know where your food comes from? For the vast majority of people in the medieval era, food came from the land immediately around them. A peasant family might have a small personal garden called a croft right next to their cottage. Here they would grow vegetables like peas, onions, and cabbage and herbs for cooking and medicine. This garden was their personal food security. They would work their strips of land in the larger communal fields of the manor, growing grains like wheat and barley. They might have foraging rights in the local woods, where they could gather nuts, berries, and mushrooms. Their connection to their food was direct and physical. They put the seeds in the ground, they weeded the rows, they harvested the crops with their own hands. They knew intimately the effort required to produce a single meal. Today, most of us are completely detached from the sources of our food. We buy it under fluorescent lights in a supermarket. It is packaged in plastic and bears little resemblance to its original form. We have no idea who grew it, where it was grown, or how it was grown. This detachment makes us vulnerable. We are at the mercy of a long and complex supply chain that can be easily disrupted. As the writer Michael Pollan famously summarized in his book, The Omnivore's Dilemma, don't eat anything your great-grandmother wouldn't recognize as food. This is a call to return to simpler, more direct ways of eating. The most direct way is to grow some of your own food. You don't need a large farm. You can start with a single pot on a balcony growing herbs. You can build a small raised bed in your backyard. You could join a community garden. The act of growing food is transformative. It teaches you about soil, water, and sunlight. It attunes you to the seasons. It forces you to be patient. There is nothing more satisfying than eating a tomato that is still warm from the sun, which you grew yourself from a tiny seed. It tastes better than any tomato you can buy in a store, not because of some magical technique, but because it is fresh and because you are invested in it. You know its story. The modern movement of permaculture, developed by Bill Mollison and David Holmgren in the 1970s, offers a powerful framework for designing sustainable and self-sufficient food growing systems. It is based on observing and mimicking natural ecosystems. For example, instead of planting in straight rows, you might create a food forest with layers of different plants that support each other. Whether you start with a single pot or a whole backyard, growing even a small portion of your own food is a radical act. It is a declaration of independence from the industrial food system. It is a step toward real security and resilience. What essential knowledge about soil, weather, and plant life have we lost as a society in just a few generations? If supermarkets were to close for a week, how many people would have access to a source of fresh food? How does the simple act of putting a seed in the ground and watching it grow change a person's perspective on the value of food? Number one, can you find food that isn't farmed? Before agriculture became the dominant way of life, all humans were foragers. For hundreds of thousands of years, we survived by hunting, fishing, and gathering wild plants. This deep ancestral knowledge of the natural landscape was the key to our survival. Even in the medieval period, foraging remained an important supplement to the diet, especially for the poor. The common lands and forests were a source of free food if you knew where to look. People gathered wild berries like bilberries and raspberries. They collected nuts like hazelnuts and acorns, which had to be leached of their tannins to be edible. They dug for wild roots and harvested wild greens like nettles, which are incredibly nutritious when cooked. And they gathered mushrooms, a risky but rewarding practice that required expert knowledge to distinguish the delicious from the deadly. Foraging was a way to add variety, nutrition, and a crucial buffer against starvation in lean times. Today, we see the natural world as a backdrop, a place for recreation. We walk through a park or a forest and see a wall of undifferentiated green. We have lost the eyes to see. We are surrounded by edible and medicinal plants, but we don't know how to recognize them. The skill of foraging has been almost completely lost, but it can be relearned. It is the oldest and most fundamental human skill. It is about learning to read the landscape. Relearning this skill begins with caution and respect. The number one rule of foraging is to be 100% certain of your identification before you eat anything. Get several good field guides with clear pictures and descriptions for your local area. Better yet, find an experienced local forager to learn from. Start with a few idiot-proof plants. Dandelions are a great place to start. Every part is edible: the roots, the leaves, and the flowers. The plantain, the common lawnweed, is another. Its young leaves are edible, and it has a long history of medicinal use. Lamb's quarters, another common weed, is a delicious and nutritious green related to spinach. As you gain confidence, you can learn to identify wild berries, nuts, and mushrooms. Foraging is not just about free food. It is about changing your relationship with the world around you. It turns a simple walk into a treasure hunt. It trains your powers of observation. You start to notice the details, the shape of a leaf, the texture of bark, the way a plant grows. Well, you become a participant in the ecosystem, not just an observer. It is a powerful way to connect with your environment and to remember that nature can and does provide. It is the ultimate form of self-sufficiency, a skill written into our very DNA. How many edible plant species have we completely forgotten about, and what nutritional or medicinal properties have been lost with that knowledge? In our modern, curated landscapes of lawns and ornamental plants, have we created food deserts where abundance once grew? If our agricultural system failed, would we be able to recognize the feast that is still growing wild all around us?